Good morning, students. Now I shall continue the endocrine pancreas. I talked about the insulin in the last class. Now today we shall talk about the applied physiology or applied aspects of insulin. Now you know quite well, whenever we will discuss any hormone, so far as the applied part is concerned, we will go for two important applied aspects. One is when the hormone secretion is less, we call it hyposecretion of the hormone, or when the hormone secretion is more, we call it hypersecretion of the hormone. Now in case of insulin, similar is the incidence, but the incidence of hyposecretion of insulin or less secretion of insulin or the ineffectiveness of insulin on its target tissue are more common in the population, and whenever that condition arises, that is the hyposecretion of insulin, the condition which comes out of that hyposecretion or less secretion of insulin is known as diabetes mellitus. So we shall talk about the diabetes mellitus today. Very important. Now, if we go to the definition of diabetes mellitus, then it will come like this definition. Now, the diabetes mellitus is a clinical condition due to either hyposecretion of insulin or ineffectiveness of insulin coupled with hypersecretion of glucagon. Hypersecretion of glucagon, that is very important, because you know quite well that the glucagon is an antagonistic hormone metabolically of insulin. Antagonistic hormone to that of insulin. So whenever we will define diabetes mellitus, we will call it is a clinical condition due to either decreased secretion of insulin or ineffectiveness of insulin on the target tissue along with hypersecretion of glucagon hormone. So two important hallmarks are there: less secretion of insulin or ineffective secretion of insulin along with hypersecretion of glucagon. So that is the definition of diabetes mellitus. Now we will come across the types. Two types, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 diabetes mellitus known as T1DM and type 2 is T2DM. Now so far as the type 1 diabetes mellitus is concerned, the characteristic feature of type 1 diabetes mellitus, which is less common in the population, roughly about 10%, and it is about 90%. So whenever the type 1 diabetes mellitus is concerned, it is due to the absolute deficiency of insulin from the islets of Langerhans. There is no secretion of insulin, and the conditions arising out of that absolute deficiency of insulin will be discussed later on. Now here there is no insulin secretion, that is very important. Now this cause of this type 1 diabetes mellitus may be immunogenic or non-immunogenic. It may be due to some immune disorders causing destructions of the islets of Langerhans, B cells of the islets of Langerhans, or non-immune cause causing destruction of islets of Langerhans. In that respect, the type 1 is again divided into two, type 1A and type 1B. A is due to immune destruction of the islets of Langerhans and B is due to non-immune destruction of islets of Langerhans. This is for your theoretical knowledge. Now, so far as the type 2 is concerned, this is very common in the population. This is also known as the maturity onset diabetes mellitus, whereas this type 1 is also known as the young onset diabetes mellitus. The type 1 is also dependent upon the insulin, and that's why it is also known as the insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, IDDM. The type 1 is also known as, because it is occurring from the absolute deficiency of insulin. So for the treatment of this diabetes mellitus, insulin is a must. So it is known as an insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. And this type 2 diabetes mellitus, also known as the maturity onset diabetes mellitus, usually occurs after the age of 40 years usually, and it is also known as the non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, or NIDM. So IDM and NIDM, non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, these are the two different types of diabetes mellitus prevalent in the society, depending upon the requirement of insulin. Here insulin requirement is there, obligatory, mandatory. Here the insulin requirement is not there, barring some exceptional situations. Now, so these are the types. Now we will go to the clinical features of diabetes mellitus. Clinical features. How the patient will present to you is very, very important. Presentation of diabetes mellitus, or clinical features of diabetes mellitus, important. Now we call it the classical triad of diabetes mellitus. Classical triad. Classical triad. Triad means three things will be there. Who are they? Number A, polyuria. Number B, polydipsia. And number C, polyphagia. What is the meaning of these terminologies? Polyuria means increased volume of urine. Increased urine volume. The normal urinary output is 1.5 to 2 liters per day. But in case of diabetes mellitus, it may go up to 8 to 10 liters per day if the diabetes is not controlled. So that condition is known as polyuria, increased urine volume. Second one is polydipsia, increased thirst. The throat of the patient becomes dry and the person tries to take more water. This is known as increased thirst or polydipsia. C, very, very important, polyphagia, increased hunger. I will discuss all these three important manifestations of diabetes mellitus. Particularly these three triads or three manifestations are more common in type 1 diabetes mellitus or insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, though it may also occur in type 2 diabetes mellitus, but it is more common, which is more symptomatic, type 1 diabetes mellitus, presenting with these three important clinical features, that is polyuria, polydipsia and polyphagia. Very, very important. Now we will discuss these three important manifestations in the light of increased blood sugar level. Now you quite well, whenever the insulin deficiency is there, as a result of its effects on the carbohydrate metabolism, what will happen, as I told you earlier, during the actions of insulin, that whenever the insulin is there, insulin will try to increase the uptake of glucose from the blood into the tissues, particularly in the liver, muscle and adipose tissue. So due to the deficiency of insulin, if that intake is not there, there will be increased blood sugar level known as hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia. This is due to decreased uptake of glucose from the blood into the target tissues, that is the liver, adipose tissue or the fatty tissue and the muscle tissue. So the blood sugar level will remain high, number one. Number two, the deficiency of insulin will cause increased breakdown of glycogen from the liver. So that broken down glycogen will come as glucose into the circulation and will add to the hyperglycemia. And third one, there is increased neoglucogenesis in the liver. Neoglucogenesis means formation of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources like amino acid, fatty acid, glycerol. That process is also increased due to the deficiency of insulin in the liver. In the liver, so three important things are happening. One is less intake of glucose from the blood into the target tissues. Second one, increased breakdown of glucose in the liver, glycogen in the liver, and the glucose is released into the circulation. And the third one, formation of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources known as neoglucogenesis, and that will also add to the plasma glucose level. So there will be hyperglycemia. Very, very important. Now, this hyperglycemia, we can now explain these three important manifestations, that is the classical triad of diabetes mellitus in the background of hyperglycemia. So if there is increased blood sugar level, what will happen? When the blood sugar level will decrease or cross the renal threshold for glucose. Renal threshold for glucose, which is normally 180 milligram percent. Normal renal threshold for glucose is normally 180 milligram percent. That whenever blood sugar level crosses 180 milligram per deciliter of blood, then what will happen? The glucose will appear in the urine, and that is the reason that this value, that is 180 milligram percent, is known as the renal threshold for glucose. That means whenever the blood sugar level goes above 180 milligram percent, glucose will appear in the urine, known as glycosuria. The condition is known as glycosuria. So appearance of glucose in the urine, glycosuria, which can be measured by Benedict's test. So if this glucose appears in the urine, what will happen? The glucose is osmotically active. It will act as osmotic diuretic and thereby will increase the volume of urine, and that's why there will be polyuria. So why the polyuria will be there? Whenever the blood glucose level crosses the renal threshold for glucose, that is 180 milligram percent, glucose appears in the urine. As the glucose is osmotically active substance, it will act as osmotic diuretic and thereby increases the volume of urine, leading to polyuria. So this is explained, polyuria, in the light of hyperglycemia. As a result, second one, polydipsia we are coming. As a result of loss of huge amount of fluid from the body due to polyuria, there will be reduction of the plasma volume, and reduction of the plasma volume will lead to increased sensation of the thirst by the person, known as polydipsia. Though there will be no circulatory collapse as a result of loss of this huge amount of water through the urine, increased urine volume, but still there will be hyperosmolarity of the plasma, and that hyperosmolarity by a mechanism which is manifested or which occurs in the hypothalamus will lead to increased sensation of thirst, and the condition is known as the polydipsia. So actually for polydipsia, polyuria is the cause? Increased volume of urine. So plasma becomes more concentrated, known as hyperosmolar plasma. That hyperosmolar plasma acts on the thirst center in the hypothalamus. You will be knowing in your third semester what is the function of the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus also regulates the thirst of the system, biological system. So there will be increased sensation of thirst, and the condition is known as the polydipsia. Now let us come to the third one, that is the polyphagia. So polyuria, polydipsia and the polyphagia. Polyphagia means increased hunger. Now perhaps you don't know that the hunger or the food intake is controlled totally by the hypothalamus. There are two centers in the hypothalamus. One is the medial nucleus, another is the lateral nucleus. These two nucleus, medial nucleus and the lateral nucleus. The medial nucleus is known as the satiety centers. It is in the hypothalamus. The whole thing is in the hypothalamus. And the lateral nucleus is known as the hunger center. So there is an interaction between these two centers, that normally the hunger center inhibits, the satiety center inhibits the hunger center. This satiety center is dependent upon insulin for the entry of glucose inside the center. So insulin is responsible for the entry of glucose into the satiety center, which is insulin dependent. Rest of the brain cells, for your knowledge, you must know, rest of the brain cells are not dependent upon insulin for the cellular entry of glucose. But it is only the medial nucleus of the hypothalamus, classically known as the satiety center, depends upon the insulin for the entry of glucose inside the satiety center. This is a peculiar phenomenon of nature. Other insulin independent cells are there in our body, right at this juncture. Apart from these brain cells, erythrocytes, RBC, not dependent upon the insulin, and the epithelial cells of the intestine and the kidney, they are not also dependent upon the insulin for the entry of glucose. And perhaps you know quite well that the entry of glucose in those cells are dependent upon the secondary active transport. You have read it already. Secondary active transport. So they are not dependent upon the insulin for the entry of glucose into the lining cells of the kidney and the intestine, along with the erythrocytes or RBC, not dependent upon the insulin. Whole brain cells, almost all the brain cells are not dependent upon the insulin for the entry of glucose, excepting this particular part of the hypothalamus, that is the medial nucleus of the hypothalamus, also known as satiety center, that is dependent upon the cellular entry, upon the insulin for the cellular entry of glucose. Is this clear to you? This is very, very important. So in case of diabetes mellitus, what happens over here? Due to the lack of glucose in the satiety center, because insulin is not there, glucose cannot enter the cell, so there is no metabolism of the cell, no energy production within the cell in diabetes mellitus. So what happens? The inhibitory effect on the hunger center is not there. The inhibitory effect, because this satiety center is not functioning normally, as a result of which it is no longer able to inhibit the hunger center. So what is the ultimate result? There is unopposed action of the hunger center, and the person feels abnormally hungry. In diabetes mellitus, the uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, if you know any case or see any subject, you will see that the person takes food every hourly. Every hourly, there is voracious hunger. There is voracious hunger. We also call it ravenous hunger. There is ravenous hunger. Ravenous hunger or voracious hunger. So that can explain the polyphagia. So polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia, these are the classical symptomatic manifestations of diabetes mellitus, particularly applicable for the type 1. It is also present in the type 2 diabetes mellitus. Symptomatic type 2 diabetes mellitus, right? So that is the clinical features. Apart from the classical triads, there are also some other important clinical features pertaining to the carbohydrate, protein and fat metabolism. As I told you earlier, the effect of insulin deficiency, that is in case of diabetes mellitus, the main effect on the carbohydrate metabolism is on the liver, that and the absence of the capacity of the cells to pick up glucose from the circulation. So there will be hyperglycemia. So the carbohydrate metabolism is leading to hyperglycemia. Effect of diabetes mellitus on carbohydrate metabolism is hyperglycemia. Carbohydrate hyperglycemia. Protein, what will be the effect of protein metabolism? As a result of insulin deficiency, there will be more catabolism of protein, increased breakdown of protein, and there will be no protein synthesis due to the inability of the cells to take up amino acids from the circulation. So there will be catabolism of the proteins, breakdown of proteins, and as a result of breakdown of protein, there will be increased amino acid in the circulation, and that amino acid helps in the process of neoglucogenesis. As I told you earlier, that is in case of diabetes mellitus, one of the important causes of hyperglycemia is the production of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. So amino acids, increased amino acid will lead to neoglucogenesis. So that is on protein metabolism. The protein metabolism, there will be catabolism, number one, and lack of anabolism. There will be no protein synthesis, and there will be breakdown of the already stored protein, leading to increased availability of amino acid, which will lead to neoglucogenesis and will add to the hyperglycemia, as I told you earlier. Fat, very important action on fat metabolism, very important action, because you know quite well that there are two important enzymes, as I told you earlier. One is the lipoprotein lipase, which is stimulated by the insulin, and that acts on the VLDL, very low density lipoprotein, and causes there is breakdown of the VLDL, which causes increased production of the fatty acid and the glycerol, and that fatty acid is carried to the adipose tissue where the fat synthesis occurs. This is the normal phenomenon in presence of insulin. So in absence of insulin, what will happen? There will be no activity of lipoprotein lipase. There will be diminished activity of lipoprotein lipase. Lipoprotein lipase. Diminished activity of lipoprotein lipase. As a result of, there will be increased VLDL in the circulation, which leads to increased triglyceride in the plasma. So in case of diabetes mellitus, if you see any subject of diabetes mellitus, uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, then they will present with increased level of triglyceride in the plasma, which is known as the hypertriglyceridemia. Hypertriglyceridemia. There will be increased cholesterol synthesis too, because as a result of the lipoprotein lipase deficiency, there is increased availability of the fatty tissues, particularly the fatty acids and the glycerol. There will be increased synthesis of cholesterol in the liver, which is released into the circulation, and the person suffers from increased serum cholesterol level known as hypercholesterolemia. So there will be hypertriglyceridemia and hypercholesterolemia. Very, very important. Now, there will be another important thing. As a result of increased availability of fatty acid, why fatty acid will be increased over there? Because in the adipose tissue or the fatty tissue there is another enzyme known as hormone sensitive lipase. Hormone sensitive lipase, which is normally inhibited by insulin. So normally inhibited by insulin, this hormone sensitive lipase. Lipoprotein lipase is stimulated by insulin, and hormone sensitive lipase in the fatty tissue is inhibited by insulin. So in diabetes mellitus there will be increased activity of the hormone sensitive lipase. So that will lead to breakdown of the stored fat in the fat depot, causing liberation of fatty acid plus glycerol. Fatty acid plus glycerol. Hormone sensitive lipase is normally inhibited by insulin. So in diabetes mellitus this inhibition will not be there. This hormone becomes active and causes breakdown of the stored fat into fatty acid and glycerol. Both these contribute to the neoglucogenesis, number one. And number two, increased fatty acid metabolism. Increased fatty acid metabolism will lead to formation of ketoacidosis. The diabetic ketoacidosis is an important metabolic complication of uncontrolled diabetes mellitus due to increased oxidation, also known as the beta oxidation of fatty acids, increased availability of fatty acid into the circulation. So the system utilizes fatty acid more than glucose, and this is known as the glucose sparing effect of diabetes mellitus. And that sparing also contributes to the hyperglycemia. So the glucose is spared, is not used as an important metabolic fuel. Rather, the fatty acid, which is abundant in the circulation due to the breakdown of the depot fat, is utilized, oxidized in the liver, known as the beta oxidation, and increased fatty acid oxidation leads to increased acetyl-CoA formation, which causes formation of the ketone bodies and the different types of acids which are part and parcel of the ketone bodies. What are the ketone bodies? Acetone, acetoacetic acid, and the beta hydroxybutyric acids. So two acids are there, acetoacetic acid and the beta hydroxybutyric acid. They will increase the plasma concentration of H plus, leading to diminished pH. So there will be ketone bodies along with H plus concentration in the blood, increased H plus concentration. That means there will be ketoacidosis, which is a very, very important and dangerous condition. It's a medical emergency of the patient suffering from uncontrolled diabetes mellitus. If it is not treated promptly, the person will die immediately from the ketoacidosis, diabetic ketoacidosis. So these are the complete clinical picture, not only that three triads, that is a polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia. There will be metabolic derangements as a result of insulin deficiency pertaining to the carbohydrate metabolism, pertaining to the protein metabolism, pertaining to the fat metabolism, which complicates the whole picture. Is this clear? The next manifestation are pertaining to the serum K plus. As the insulin causes, as I told you earlier, that as the insulin causes increased cellular entry of potassium ion, along with glucose and amino acids. Perhaps you can remember that one of the important actions of insulin was to help potassium ion from the plasma to enter inside the cell. So when there will be insulin deficiency in diabetes mellitus, the plasma potassium level will be very, very high. That is another dangerous condition pertaining to the cardiovascular system and also to the excretory system, because there will be increased K plus load on the kidney, which may lead to renal failure. Renal failure, kidney may not handle this huge amount of potassium ion. Not only that, there will be increased K plus in the plasma known as hyperkalemia that may contribute to the cardiac arrhythmia, as I told you earlier, and the person may die. That is very, very important. So pertaining to the K plus, which is very, very important, there is hyperkalemia, increased serum potassium level in case of diabetes mellitus, because the insulin normally causes increased cellular entry of K plus, which is not possible due to the deficiency of insulin. So the serum K plus level will be very, very high, and that may pose a threat to the renal function and the cardiac function. Is this clear? The total plethora of the complications of diabetes mellitus, I think, is clear now. These are the clinical manifestations of diabetes mellitus. Now, two important things are there left: diagnosis . How to diagnose diabetes mellitus? In earlier days, we used a method known as the glucose tolerance test, GTT, but which is now abolished. Glucose tolerance test is not employed for the diagnosis of diabetes mellitus. For the diagnosis, the first case of diabetes mellitus, how to diagnose a diabetic patient, a patient as a diabetic, is if the patient, the international criteria or the American Diabetic Association or ADA criteria of diagnosing diabetes mellitus, if the patient is symptomatic, that means showing the classical features of the polyuria, polydipsia and polyphagia, as I told you, symptomatic patient, then his blood sugar is done, and if it is more than equal to 200 milligram per cent, then the diabetes mellitus confirmed. So symptomatic patient showing symptoms, blood sugar is done, random blood sugar is not related to any food. Patient showing symptoms of polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia or other metabolic derangements, as I have already mentioned, then blood sugar is done immediately, randomly, right at that moment when the patient comes to the doctor, and if it is more than equal to 200 milligram per cent, then the diabetes mellitus is confirmed. No doubt about it. Now, if the patient is asymptomatic, not presenting with the classical manifestation of diabetes mellitus, then the fasting plasma sugar or FPS, if it is more than equal to 126 milligram per cent, for 3 consecutive readings, or postprandial plasma sugar PPPS more than equal to 180 milligram per cent for 3 consecutive readings, asymptomatic persons, then the person is stamped as suffering from diabetes mellitus. This is the American Diabetic Association criteria, ADA criteria. So that is all about the diagnosis. Symptomatic, random, more than 200 milligram percent, DM confirmed, diabetes mellitus is confirmed. Asymptomatic, fasting plasma sugar more than equal to 126 milligram percent, very very important for 3 consecutive readings. Say for example in a gap of 3 weeks, 1 week, first week, second week and third week, showing the same results, the person is stamped as diabetes mellitus, suffering from diabetes mellitus. PPPS, postprandial plasma sugar, 2 hours after a meal, standard meal, or 75 grams of glucose. Postprandial means fasting, 12 hours or 10 hours fasting. Took the meal in the last night and is doing the blood sugar level in the next morning after 10 to 12 hours. This is classical fasting sample collection. Postprandial, prandial means after meal, prandial means meal, postprandial means after meals, 2 hours after the standard meal which the person takes, or 75 grams of glucose, 2 hours after taking 75 grams of glucose, whichever is convenient for the patient. And if it is more than 180 milligram percent, once again in 3 occasions, then the person is stamped as suffering from diabetes mellitus. So that's all about the diagnosis. Another important diagnostic criteria is used whether the person suffering from diabetes mellitus for a long time is having a very good blood sugar control for the last 3 months, is glycosylated hemoglobin, HbA1c. This is applicable for not the diagnosing the person for the first time. This is in case of persons who are chronically suffering from diabetes mellitus, and this particular parameter gives an important impression of the control of blood sugar for the previous 3 months, and the normal value should be less than 6.5 gram percent. This is very very important. 6.5 gram percent or less than that. Up to this limit it is allowed. So A1C or HbA1c, glycosylated hemoglobin, you have already read in your hematology part, but the significance of that particular thing is there, that when it is measured in the person suffering from long-standing diabetes mellitus, then its measurement should be done to have a control, to just monitor the control of the person to have blood sugar control for the last 3 months, and if it is 6.5 gram percent or less than that, then the person is having a good control of the diabetes mellitus. If it is more than 7.5 gram percent, then the person is having impaired blood sugar control, and if it is more than 8 gram percent, then it is uncontrolled diabetes mellitus. This is a standardization is done over there, but these values should be remembered. The normal value of HbA1c in a normal subject should be 6.5 gram percent or less than that. So that is about the diagnosis. The treatment, you should not know it in details, just I am telling the basic principles. Treatment, diet, exercise, anti-diabetic drugs. Threefold. Diet should be a balanced diet of the fat less than 30%, carbohydrate more than 55% and protein 10 to 15%. And this carbohydrate usually containing more fiber carbohydrates, fiber containing carbohydrate. This is the standard diet. Exercise, walking, jogging, whatever it may be, depending upon the age and other comorbidities from which the person is suffering. The doctor decides the degree of exercise to be performed by the subject, but daily exercise, even if the free hands, are mandatory for all diabetic patients. The third one is anti-diabetic drugs. If it is type 1 diabetes mellitus, the insulin is the only choice of treatment and nothing else, because there is absolute insulin deficiency, type 1. And if it is type 2, usually the oral drugs are given which stimulates the release of insulin from the B cells of the islets of Langerhans, or increases the effectiveness of insulin on the peripheral tissue. So in type 2 diabetes mellitus, the two types, so the type 1 insulin and insulin, nothing else. Type 2, oral hypoglycemic agents. Oral hypoglycemic agents, that means the oral tablets which decreases the blood glucose level, hypoglycemic agents. Simple meaning. This may be of two types. One is the B cell stimulant. Just remember the principles. You need not know the names of the drugs right at this moment. You will be learning all about in these things in the pharmacology classes and the medicine classes. B cell stimulants, which stimulates the B cells of the islets of Langerhans to increase more more insulin. Another is the which increases the effectiveness of insulin on target tissues. Because in type 2 diabetes mellitus, it is seen that the patients are resistant partially or completely to the action of insulin on the target tissue. So these drugs will help to increase the effectiveness of insulin's action on its target tissues. So in that sense, it will cause increased insulin action on the cells and thereby causing the normal functions, physiological functions of insulin on the target tissues. One is to increase the release of insulin from the B cell, another is to increase the effectiveness of the insulin on the target tissues. So the drugs are of two varieties: beta cell stimulant or B cell stimulant, increasing the effectiveness of insulin on the target tissue. In some of the cases, it is seen that the type 2 diabetes patients having these two drugs, they fail to respond after long years, and in those cases, the insulin is the answer. They will have to also take insulin for the proper control of blood glucose level. This is clear to all of you. So that's all. Thank you. Endocrine pancreas is complete. Thank you all for your patient hearing.